Okay, I want to welcome everyone tonight. We're going to be exploring Medical Professional Speaks Out, Why Redox Now? I am Darleen Dozier, in case you haven't met me, and I joined the ASEA family just almost 3 months ago. I didn't discover it for myself. I discovered it for one of my really very sick kitties. I will report that this kitty is, I would say, almost 100% healed. It's just absolutely been beautiful to watch. But in the process, my whole family started it, my husband, myself, and my children. And I didn't know I didn't feel good until I started taking Redox and using the gel. My skin is amazing and my energy level is very much improved. My workouts are so much better. So I'm so blessed to have found, or maybe ASEA family found me, and I feel very blessed. So tonight we're going to start with a 7-minute short video, and it's featuring our CEO and co-founder, Vertus Norton. And so I'm going to cue that up here. Oops, let me go back. Sorry about that. Hang on. And I'll get that back up.
I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I took a degree from the University of Utah, managed some stores for Safeway, and then ended up going to work for General Foods Corporation. I was asked to sit on the board of a small company that had been working on a technology for about 15 years. Numerous patents, a lot of research, and they were actually producing a product using salt and water. When they told me that, they wanted me to go on their board. I said, well, you're going to have to convince me that this is real. How can you produce something from salt and water? And they said, we have a lot of research, extensive research, $10 or $15 million worth of research.
Vertus agreed to join the board of directors.
So I went to the first board meeting and found out that they were flat out of money. They were $1 million in debt. We said, let's see if we can help them find money. We tried for about 90 days, could not. Eventually, the company folded, and they actually merged it with another company, an energy company. And when that happened, that company started selling off assets. And I said, I am going to put a group of investors together, and I'm going to take a run at the company. And over the course of a year, we discovered what the product was and why it worked. We developed what's called the mechanism of action.
They discovered the product was based on redox biochemistry, a new field of science that emerged near the beginning of the 21st century. Redox signaling is a function central to all forms of life. Redox signaling molecules are created within every cell of the body and are vital to the immune system and to cellular repair and replace mechanisms. As one gets older, the body's ability to make these molecules decreases, a function of aging. The product provided a replenishing source of the exact redox signaling molecules the body creates, and in the same balance, enhancing cellular health. Knowing the product's shelf life was essential, Vertus challenged a team of researchers, including Dr. Gary Samuelson, to find a way to stabilize the product.
And finally, after months, he finally came in and said, I think I've got the product stabilized. And we started testing it and found out that he had, in fact, stabilized the product.
After stabilization had been achieved, Vertus met with a group of university scientists.
This is stabilized redox signaling molecules, both positive and negative molecules in the same bottle, stabilized. And they said, how in the world did you do this? So one of the big breakthroughs is the fact that we can stabilize molecules that you're not supposed to be able to do that. The molecules in ASEA are supposed to be fleeting. They should all return to salt and water in just a matter of minutes, and they don't. So we decided to find 40 people and create kind of a focus group, and we started giving it to them. We did that for about 2 months. We said, let's go out and find out where we are with these 40 people. So when we went out and contacted them, we found out that the 40 people had turned into 135, and the product had been shipped to 20 different countries. But in the meantime, we had contacted a friend, and he was running a very big pharmaceutical company in New Jersey, about $10–11 billion. And he finally agreed to send a group of people out and spend some time with us and see what we had come up with. So 4 people flew out on a plane. We spread out all of the research that we had out on the table. They started getting on the phone about noon back east, and they kept doing that. At about 2 o'clock, they walked in the room and said, okay, we're convinced you've got something here, and it's significant enough that we will write you a check big enough that you won't want to talk to anybody else. And I said, what's the catch? And they said, you've got to shut it down. And I said, shut what down? And they said, you've got 135 people on this product right now, shut it down. People have problems all the time, and they deal with them as best they can. You're gonna have to walk away. And that kind of took us back a little bit. In fact, I said, that seems a little harsh to me. And they said, you wanna work with us, you walk away.
ASEA LLC opened its doors for business in July 2009 with just a handful of independent associates. Today, there are tens of thousands, and their ranks are growing exponentially every month. In 2012, the company announced its entry into Europe, the first of many international steps to come.
My wife questions why I'm doing this. She said, you've retired more than once, and it's time for you to join me, and let's enjoy the golden years, if you will. But recently, a young lady came up, and she broke down and started sobbing. And she had a health challenge in her family that was really severe, and she was introduced to ASEA. And because of what ASEA did, she was just grateful. So I find it hard to talk about, but that's a reason.
Okay. I'm going to pass this off to Marian now.
Okay, can we have the slides back up?
We sure can.
So that was the beginning of it all. And since then, well, Darleen told you that it was her kitty that brought her into ASEA. And for most people, there's 6 different reasons. One is because of a health issue for themselves. One is a health issue for others, and kitties belong in that category. Some people just like to look and feel younger. For some people, for athletes, it's so that they can have enhanced performance and recover faster. And for some, it's just to be proactive in health and for time and money. For me, it was all of the above. And I love the fact that I do feel younger. I feel like I'm 10 years younger than I was 9 years ago. And I enjoy the extra income. When we were on vacation and our gas for hauling the trailer for a week was $1,000, it was nice to know that while we were on vacation, I was making some extra income. So today we have our very special guest, Dr. Rodkey, and we've been friends for a long time. Can we have the next slide?
Yep.
Thank you. So Grant is a dentist, and he has worked in Oregon, and now he's working, I think, in Walla Walla or someplace. You're going to have to tell us more about that. But I want to know, Dr. Rodkey, what drew you to ASEA, and what are some of the experiences that you've had? I know I've heard that even in your dentistry work that you've had experiences, but just share us why it's so special for you. And I just thank you for coming and being with us tonight. you need to unmute, and could we get to the full screen so we could see him?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to say that it was an accident that happened to my father that drew me to ASEA, and it was through my sister Diane, that in the Portland, Oregon area. And when Dad was 91 years old, was that 8 years ago, he slipped on something called black ice that we have up here in the Northwest, and he came down on his skull, on his head, and smacked very hard on the pavement. And there were a lot of people that year that died from that very same accident. Many people much younger than he. And anyway, it was a very life-changing situation for us. My sister was down in Portland. She had just heard about this new saltwater solution that had some miraculous powers. And as a good clinician, of course, I've got to be a little bit skeptical before I just jump into something. She wanted me to take it to Dad in the hospital. You can imagine that happening today. Probably I wouldn't be in the hospital, period. But anyway, I ended up the following week going down to visit her in Portland, Oregon. And my dad was being transferred out of the hospital to a care facility. And I learned about Redox at my sister's house, and got to see a little bit of the presentation. A lot of it was the original presentation that we just saw, only the longer version, which if somebody has access to, 7minutes.info, that's a really good program if you go to the 16-minute one. Anyway, so I saw that, and then I heard about Redox signaling molecules and heard testimonials, and I knew that there was some validity to some of these natural products, and I found that this wasn't even a natural product, it's a native product, something that's produced in our own body. And well, the following week, my sister and I drove up to Spokane, Washington. We stopped along the way and met Dr. Dick Walker, who explained the science to me in a PowerPoint slide, and the credibility factor skyrocketed. And I really was not one of those long-term skeptics. It didn't take me very long to see that this was right, this was true. And we got to Spokane and found that our dad had declined dramatically from being released from the hospital. And we introduced my father to Redox signaling molecules. He ended up having a tremendous recovery as his body unleashed, the ASEA unleashed the inner doctor, the doctor within, that's built into our bodies and fixes our bodies if it has the right tools. And those tools are Redox signaling molecules. And they went to work. The physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy that my dad went through, he went through in record time, according to the therapists that were working with him. And it was not an overnight recovery, but it was a dramatic recovery. And in that fall, at a family reunion, he sang, "Oh, Danny Boy," faltering, but he made it through. And then he went on to thrive, and he is now 99 years old. And he thrives as long as he's taking ASEA Redox signaling molecules. And my sister and I know when he's not been taking that, because we'll notice a change in his speech, a slurring in his speech, a halting in his speech. And so that's really what drew me to ASEA. I wasn't necessarily drawn towards it. My sister worked to introduce me to it, and I was mildly skeptical. And that skepticism disappeared, not just with Dr. Walker's PowerPoint presentation, but now by all the confirming experiences that I've seen in the friends in my life and others, and so many testimonials. So that I guess that would be what attracted me there. And you had some more questions for me, I think, right?
Well, yeah, if you wanted to share any of the other experiences that you've had, I'd love to hear that. And then also just where you see ASEA going in your life and why it's so important.
Okay. Well, my first actual experience, I started taking the molecules shortly after we got them to my dad. But my first actual experience was on Easter Sunday that same year. I was putting in a ham into the oven to sear it. So I had the oven at 450 degrees, and the oven is a little small, and I bumped the back of one of my fingers up against the little curved entrance to the oven, and you know, you can almost hear that searing noise, you know, and yes, it did hurt. So the first reaction my wife had was, well, get it under some ice water really quick. And I said, well, I'm going to try spraying some of this before we had the gel. So I'm going to try spraying some of that fluid on there and see what it does. And it immediately took away the discomfort from burning. And I never had any swelling, no blisters, no sores. There was a little red spot there. And 3 days later, there was no evidence at all that there had been any kind of a burn. And so I thought that was pretty amazing. A friend of mine couldn't find the burn. And so I started introducing people that way. One of the most dramatic things that I like to share, and that was, we're talking about animals and kitties. Well, I got a little doggy. My little girl, her name's Isabel. She's a little Chihuahua. And she was at the veterinarian clinic, and she got 3 vaccines simultaneously. And she ended up developing what we later figure out was Guillain-Barré, based on what I saw. Her hind end was paralyzed, and she went through some neurological changes. But I started giving her ASEA because she couldn't walk, and we'd have to carry her on our walks. And I started giving her ASEA, and she started little by little walking. She'd start with 5 feet at a very, very slow pace, and then she started to pick it up, and now she's at full pace. And that to me, that was an amazing thing. Other personal experience when I had a cat bite from a cat that we like to walk, and unfortunately a dog scared it. I grabbed him and he bit right into my hand, and I almost lost my use of my hand due to that. So I was taking the Redox and putting it in the wound every time they changed the bandages. And I had a very quick recovery. I had a very pain-free recovery. And the hand therapist, the hand surgeon, and others were just amazed at how quickly that occurred. And one of the big things too, in that, you know, we don't make any claims of curing any problems, but my mom has a condition of forgetfulness that starts with a D, and it was quite severe 9 years ago. And she was 8 years ago, excuse me. My dad introduced this to her after he'd recovered quite a bit, within about a year of his recovery. And we started to see some huge changes. Her personality came back. She doesn't have a perfect memory, but I'll tell you what, she has personality. She remembers people's names. And we also noticed with her, if she has not had ASEA for any period of time, that comes back as well. So I've seen seen a lot of things in the 8-year period of time, personally, and then with other people's testimonials. So I'd have to say that was sort of, you know, my testimonial wrapped in about 4. What I'm excited about,
I noticed, Grant, was my dental visits are better. My gums are better, and the tartar is less. Have you, as a dentist, noticed that with any of your people who are using ASEA, or with yourself?
Well, unfortunately, I sold my practice before I started with ASEA, so I wasn't able to, have that field of people. But I did use it on. I do know that there are testimonials, and I've seen radiographs that show changes that I can't explain any other way than to say it was redox signaling molecules. And one of the things that I have found was that when people have wounds inside the mouth, people get those ulcers, those little canker sores, you might say, and they're really painful, and they last for 7 to 10 days, something like that. And what I found is that when I had the ASEA, when I applied that, those go away very quickly. And it really helps resolve a lot of the discomfort issues. And then the other big thing that I notice is when I'm doing any kind of surgeries, removal of teeth, and I've done this on hundreds of cases where once I've taken the tooth out, I will apply the redox signaling molecules to the wound, and the bleeding stops almost immediately. And the wound recovery is accelerated. And I found that in general, it seems like wound recovery is about 1/3 of the time as the normal expected wound recovery time. I had a leg injury up to about 2 years ago, and they said it would take about 12 weeks to recover. Well, between ASEA, between the redox, between the gel, and a couple other technologies, I was able to reduce that down to 4 weeks, and the physical therapist was pretty amazed at the results there.
Okay.
So yeah, no, it really works great in the oral cavity, and for wounds, for sores, those kind of things.
Grant,
Okay.
I had a question for you back to your mom. How much
Yeah.
does she take?
4 ounces a day. Yeah, and I've got a dirty little secret. we've got a family member that's in charge sort of mom and dad, and she has done everything in her power to block us from getting that stuff to mom and dad. And so we it's like smuggling Bibles into Russia. We smuggle redox signaling molecules to them, and my dad and mom were without redox signaling molecules for about 3 weeks, and it was unconscionable watching the decline that I was seeing in both of them, and criminal, I think, on behalf of a family member. But that aside, my dad knows 100% that these work, and he takes them. So we're very grateful that we have a father that's not resistant to that, and that loves his wife enough to give that to her.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, you can, if you have one, we'll pop some more questions on at the end. And Grant mentioned that we do not use ASEA to diagnose or to treat any disease. And I love the fact that you call it the inner doctor. So
yeah, and I want to make one last statement to talk about what I'm excited about for the future of ASEA. Is that not only did they harness the technology to stabilize the redox signaling molecules so that they will last longer in our bodies than the week, they can store up to 18 months, but now they're using the knowledge, the science behind the technology on how the cell works, and they're developing products that enhance the environment for the redox signaling of our cells, aside from the use of redox signaling molecules.
So we're excited for convention because we're going to get some new technologies and products that will work with the ASEA. Well, thank you. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Jerry, who is the one who introduced all of this to us. And his background is physical therapy and coaching. And what we know is he's just our Papa Bear. He loves us and helps us in our health, in our business. And he's done amazing things at the Shriners Hospital and with athletes. And he's one of the top leaders in ASEA. So Jerry, would you come and just share with us?
Well, yeah, this is a really interesting group of people, and I just marvel at the opportunity to be asked each week to come back. They're a group of people that see something different, see something bigger, see something better. I want to ask a question of us. We know that about 80% of, well, I guess it's 80. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So it'd be 80% of medical issues in our country are related to lifestyle, stress, and environment. All that aggregate activity leads to aging. And the new discoveries in aging, really, let's just frame this all. How can anything do that many things? We've talked about everything from kitty cats to dental work and back again. But think about it from this standpoint. It's very interesting. When I was first introduced to this concept of stepping outside of chemistry and surgery and pills as a physical therapist, I was looking at it from what if we change the lifestyle, the stress, and the environment? What if we changed the way in which the cells in your body can operate? And it's made the biggest difference. It's answering more questions than I even knew to ask. We had so many unfilled opportunities. We had so many unfilled areas of just unanswered questions. And now we understand clearly that all of the cells in your body have the same DNA as the original cell, that egg that was fertilized that became you. And each of those then, through a miraculous set of information, shares and exchanges and becomes different types of cells that become you. And the most fundamental part of those cells is that they have to make their own energy. And in the process of making their own energy by burning fats and sugars, it's something that's studied by all who study biology. There are a series of cells that become the beacons, the signaling characters that allow the cell to know what's going on, when it needs to start and stop and change, and how to read the DNA, how to rebuild the cells, how to rebuild them stronger than what they were before. It's always been there. We see one application of that is if you have a person who becomes quite sedentary for their life, they don't get around much. Perhaps they're hurting or ill or sick, or they're too busy doing other things, and you don't use your body. Well, the old saying's really true. If you don't use it, you lose it. But once we start back up using it again in a proper fashion where we stress the cells, let's call it resistive exercise, and then with the proper amount of rest, there's this magical system inside of each cell that can say, hey, listen, if you're going to keep doing that, we're going to rebuild a cell that's more robust and stronger than the current cell. That runs absolutely contrary to the deterioration that happens to everything in our universe. So if that mechanism exists, does it slow down? Well, we start taking a look. And I've known, in my physical therapy career, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you break your bones, it takes 6 to 8 weeks for that bone to knit back together. If you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, many times it can't remember how to do it at all. But every cell still has the same DNA it did when you were very young. Something is missing. And then to top it off, just to give the other end of the spectrum, my grandson is only 2 years old, getting up on a bench, pulled the bench over and broke his toe. He didn't spend 6 to 8 weeks in a cast. He spent 2. So you go from 2 weeks, and then with the same cells, or the same informational pieces within the cells, at least the DNA doesn't change. But over time, everything slows down. and we get exposed to more damage and more in. Well, let me answer this. Rhoda, for example, is on our call here. And did you know that Rhoda's grandparents, she's exposed to more toxicity in 15 minutes than her grandparents would have experienced in their entire lifetime.
Wow.
And we have to adapt more quickly than we ever did before. So many of these things that are breaking us down and making us tired and putting us off track and changing our attitudes and all the things that we know wrong with us could be communication problems. So what we did was we finally found a way to enhance and reestablish and restart the communication that used to work when you were younger. Imagine every single cell being able to address the world in a way it did when you were 15, 20, 30 years younger. Sometimes we see even back into the embryo, what would happen? Well, each cell wears out and gets replaced. And if it gets replaced with better information, and it can use the original factory materials that are already available in the cell, really, is there anything we can't do? So we asked ourselves, how do we get this to a world that's never heard of anything like this before? We found out the very best way was to take caring people and have them introduce it to caring people. Not trying to push anybody's buttons or overwhelm the system or just display massive hyperbole and over talk things. It's just basically, if it makes a difference, it makes a difference. And when people can share from their heart, we now can spread out, what they call it, virally now. One person to the next, each one empowered to help a friend in some way. So here's the options. We've put together this group just because we're like-minded people who are looking to spend more time building family relationships, making differences in our communities. We even have some animal lovers here. All of us working toward things that matter to each of us. But then we find out pretty quickly when we start to work in teams that there's a surplus, a vast surplus of capability. So what can we do if we turn those capabilities around to other members in the community and help them to move up and be overcome and to overcome the difficulties in their lives? And then they have more time, more energy, more focus to be able to change other lives. It's been one of the most remarkable experiences. So this team was born from that ethos, that none of us is as smart as all of us. And there's a way that we hooked it up with the company that manufactures it, does all the science, does all the legal work and paying the bills and doing all those things. And they gave us a little mandate and said, make teams of real people. In those teams, we found that people have all kinds of skills we never would have known until we come up against some challenge or some new horizon. And then we find out that people working together can do all kinds of things. So they gave us some options. The first option was just some of you might want to take this information and dive deeper. We can certainly help you do that. Just get more information. And but mostly what we suggest is you get a case of it and do what we call a case study. Put it on yourselves and the people that you know. Stick with it. We know that if you use it for a month, about 15% of the people, if they had no idea what they were drinking, will have this amazing experience where they go, that is completely irrefutable. After 2 months, that goes up to about 50%. And after 3 months, it's about 95%. So for those of you who want to really take a run at being a totally different person, remembering many things that you could do when you were younger, I'd get on that train. So we can get you the products in a couple of ways. One of them is a person who decides that they want to get their own access to be able to order it themselves. That's called a preferred customer. Another one would be somebody who says, you know what, I want to join the team. And joining the team simply means We buy worldwide distribution rights for $40. We can go into 32 different countries. We can use this team to develop and grow each other in our own strengths. But we can spend time together. We can compare notes. We can figure out what's going on in society and match it. It's been the most remarkable and agile way we've ever seen to bring things to the market. That started in Salt Lake City. Here we are, little Spokane, Washington. And in the first 6 or 7 years of its existence, this was the largest area of distribution in the world. Now over $200 million a year, and yet in yearly sales of the company. And it's growing by leaps and bounds just because people talk to people. So for those of you from any walk of life who came here and you see that you want to get a little bit more, to be able to get through being done with you and move on to the next step, which is to gather together with others to solve some of the great problems of our day, and then to share life's experiences, and then to move one other level and to give other people the chance to get freedom in their lives. That's that last little bit. So when the person who sent you here asks you again, tell them some of the things that were most interesting to you. And as they say in that famous commercial, if it's something that interests you, we'll leave the light on for you. So I'll pass this back, and I think it's Darleen. Are you the one?
Darleen is up. Yep.
Yeah.
Very
Thank
good.
you. Thank you, Jerry. Did anybody have any questions of Jerry? Well, I'm going to queue up the next slide if you think of
Okay,
anything. you wanna-
I'll answer one. It says that a lot of people wonder what my product experience was. Well, once I figured this out, it was done for life. I just didn't have to even think again. I used to be ugly before I started using this. So why would I ever want to go back to that? You know, there were certain product experiences that I had. One was athletic. When I first was introduced to it, I've been a competitive swimmer since, well, over 50 years. And I know exactly how long it takes me to get 4 lengths of the pool. And I started going faster, and I'm old. That didn't make any sense. And my heart rate was about 10 beats a minute lower while going 4 seconds faster, and then doing them over and over and over again. That was unheard of. So I started using it on athletes. I've actually been involved with several world records where we changed how that body recovered much, much, much more quickly. Then one day, while I was ignoring this and trying to walk around in life throughout, I was just overwhelmed with time. My oldest son said, "Dad, why is it that you can go to that children's hospital and play with everyone else's kids, and if you ever come home, there's no time for us?" I was running a laboratory in the hospital and teaching at the university, and I had a crisis. I needed to come home. I needed to figure out a way to make a bigger difference with more people and make it faster. So that's what really drew me. And then my wife looked me in the eye. My youngest daughter was getting ready to go off to college. She had 3 different illnesses at the same time, and she couldn't even lift her head off the couch. We had to almost lift her head to get her to drink something. She was leaving in 2 days to go from Spokane to Phoenix to start a whole new life. She didn't have a prayer. So my wife says, "You've got that stuff in your closet. You think I don't see it. I know it's over there." She's known Denny, our sponsor, for years. Denny was picking on me for years to get started in this. We gave it to my daughter. And by the next day, she got up and walked to the mailbox. Well, that doesn't sound like something big. Then by afternoon, she was 50% better. The next day, she was up and around. We loaded her up. She had all the energy she needed. Went to a family reunion, and she went off of it for a day or two. Was flat on her face again. So we brought it back, and in 6 hours, she was up and going and never looked back. My wife turned to me and said, "Why are you dragging your feet?" Two of the things that I often learn when we invite people to be a part of what we do, if we ask the men, or if we ask the ladies, they go, "Give me 3 of those, 2 of those, and 1 of those." I'll get started right now. And Bob doesn't even know we have this checking account I'm doing it from. If I ask the men, they always say, I have to ask my wife. So I was that guy. She had just thumped me on the side of the head and said, get going. Here we go. So that's how I got into it. All right, back to you.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm going to go ahead and share tomorrow's Zoom that we have at 3:30. But first, I just want to thank everybody for taking time and joining us tonight. We appreciate it. And special thanks to Dr. Rodkey and Jerry White for speaking on our behalf. We learn every single time we have these guest speakers, so it never gets old. Tomorrow, our meeting's at 3:30, and we will be using Gloria's Zoom. And it is going to be, the guest speaker is Dr. Larry Cairns. Am I saying that right, Jerry?
Perfect.
Cairns?
Yep.
Okay. He's a board certified obstetrician and gynecologist. And I think it's going to be a fabulous presentation, and hope everybody can join us tomorrow, 3:30 Pacific time on Gloria's Zoom. And thanks everyone for showing up. Appreciate it.
Everybody bring your obstetrics and your gynecology tomorrow. Let me stop the recording.